Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Casey Kilboy podcast, where I say, let's talk about anything. I am so excited to start this new series on my podcast called Casey and Friends, where I interview people in my life who have experience and knowledge in a lot of areas. So that is why today I am interviewing my good friend Alyson Moore. She is an amazing woman of God. She and her husband have served in ministry together for many years. She is a very successful entrepreneur, and they are raising two amazing children, one of which who has autism. I'm so excited for all of you listeners to join in on this conversation today and glean insight and encouragement from Alyson on this extremely relevant and important topic of autism. So thank you, Alyson, for being on the podcast today. I'm so excited to hang out and talk with you. People just get to watch us hang out. How fun is
I
that?
know. They get the best versions of us on the podcast, which is great.
And Alyson interviewed me on her podcast a year or two ago. And so I thought, who is the first person I want to interview on mine? Alyson.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm glad to be here, and I'm so excited that you started a podcast. It's like one of the funnest things that you can do just to like stretch yourself. And yeah, so I'm super happy for you and excited that you have kind of delved into this world because it's fun.
Oh, thank you. You inspired me when you started
Yeah,
it. And I thought I could never do that. And then one day I was thinking, I'm like, I can't do that. Alyson did it. Let's go for it.
you absolutely can do it. So, and you are doing it. So that's
All right. Well, could you start off by telling us a bit about you and your family, and then share what led up to getting your son diagnosed with autism?
yeah, sure. So, I have been married to my husband for 23 years. Once you hit
Yay!
that 20 mark, yeah, you're kind of like, how many years again? So we're in between 20 and 25. So 23 years. We have an 18-year-old daughter who we are moving into college on Monday. So that's exciting. We have done some packing and she's ready. And so we're very excited. And she's not going far. She's just going 45 minutes away. So we have her, and then we have our son who is 11. And like Casey said, he does have autism, but just to back up a little bit. So my husband and I, we've been in ministry for we've been married 23 years. We've been in ministry for 22 years. And I do many things as a job. So, but he's been a pastor for a very, very long time. So two kids, again, our son, he's 11 and a half. And so when we moved to Arizona, he was 5, and he was starting kindergarten that fall. And I'd put him into this pretty, I don't want to say strict, but very traditional learning school. It was a charter school here in Phoenix, and we put him and our daughter in it, and it was a disaster from like day one. And we thought, well, maybe he just doesn't like school. He likes to kind of just be by himself and kind of do what he wants to do, and he doesn't like the structure of school. But as time went on, he was having a lot of behavioral issues, like things we don't see at home very much. And so it was very shocking to us when they said that they had tested him at school, because we were working with the school on how to like figure this out. And so the school was like, we tested him, the school psychologist tested him, and he is borderline on the spectrum. So we want you to go get like a real like testing with the doctor. And so my husband and I kind of looked at each other, and I think like it was just like, okay, we need to figure this out. And so it wasn't like, oh, there's a possible diagnosis of autism. It was like, let's just get this figured out because life is crazy right now. Like we couldn't get him to go to school. He was crying. It was a mess. And that happened for a very long time. So we went to a developmental pediatrician, and within like, I don't know, 15 minutes, she was like, oh yeah, he's definitely on the spectrum. He's a stimmer. So he claps his hands a lot when he's excited or when he's playing. And we had never really thought of that as an autistic trait. Well, come to find out, it's a very big indicator that your child's probably on the spectrum. And he would do it in different ways. Like he would have toys that he would twist and flip and do that. And we didn't realize that that was his stimming. And then when he didn't have a toy, he was doing it with his hands and stuff. So she saw that and she's like, oh yeah, that was a good one. That was a good stim. Yeah, he's definitely on the spectrum. And so we just started the road of figuring out what kind of schooling works for him. I pulled him from that school. I put him in a Montessori for 6 months, like a semester, just so we could have a place for him to be, that I knew was a little more flexible. It wasn't such a traditional learning situation, which he was not thriving in. So we put him in the Montessori just to kind of, until things kind of settled down, we could figure some things out. So that was kind of the steps of us with the diagnosis. Yeah. Did I answer that question? Was that the question?
Yeah, that was amazing. I'm already learning from you. I didn't know the flipping and stuff of toys could also be stimming.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was for Ryson. Like he had this golf club from this kids golf club thing. And he took it to Disneyland. Like I have videos of him like flipping it around at Disneyland. Like he always had to have it, or he had to have like a wooden spoon or something. And as he's grown up, he doesn't do that so much with toys. I actually physically like uses his hands to stim. So yeah, I didn't know that either. And then it was like, oh, that's stimming. That
Wow.
makes sense. Like things started clicking a little bit of like, oh, that's why he does this, or that's why this behavior manifests itself. Like things kind of, when we got that diagnosis, things kind of were like, oh, now this makes sense. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, thank you for sharing. Because I think a lot of families may still be in that category where they're trying to figure things out, and you may confirm some things to them listening to this right now. Like, that sounds like my child, but I didn't think that was, considered autism, and they may want to move forward just because of what you just said now.
Right. Right. And I mean, I know we're going to get into this, but I just had to remind myself like a diagnosis wasn't a death sentence for him. And we can talk about that later because I think you're going to ask a question like that. But I wasn't scared of the diagnosis. I was actually relieved because it made some things very clear to us. So for us, there was some grieving and sadness, but also like hope and like, okay, now we can move forward and figure things out.
Oh, I love that. All right, we're moving forward now on that feeling of hope and relief. So let's go to the next question. What has your journey been like since you found out his diagnosis, and what have you done?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm like a go in full force type of person. So I had to immediately figure out like what do we need to do for him. So pulling him out of traditional school, putting him in Montessori school. And then that following year, so he was in Montessori for like a semester, maybe a little longer. And then that next year, I met with the special ed department, the head of the department for our elementary district. It was just like, what do you have available for him? So I just like advocated for him to be in the best place for him. And we found a program. It's a public school that is just a classroom for kids with autism. And that he did so well in that. And now he's still in that program just at the middle school level. So that's been really, really helpful just in the schooling, being open to non-traditional schooling options. I've thought about homeschooling him in the past, just doing whatever we can to make sure that he's in an environment where he can learn at his pace, was very helpful. And when we got that diagnosis again, like I said, there was some grieving. Like I know my husband definitely grieved, like I'll probably never coach his baseball team. I'll probably never coach his basketball team because my husband's a huge sports person. And I think he still probably grieves that a little bit. We grieve a lot of like the normalcy that other families have. You can go on vacation and not have to think about, you know, your autistic child and what's the accommodations that he or she might need, where we do that everywhere we go. We look at the menus before we we go to restaurants. Is there something that Ryson's going to eat? A lot of neurotypical families don't think about that. They just don't think like, how is this going to affect our friend's child, or just things people with neurotypical kids don't think about. So I started advocating for him for therapy and just, whatever I could do to help him have as normal life as possible, or to help him thrive. Like that's the biggest thing, is like, I want him to be everything God has called him to be. God didn't make a mistake. I think the biggest thing for me is the faith aspect. He's very black and white. And of course, faith is very gray, and it takes, you're believing in something you have not seen. And so when we battle like that faith aspect with him, and like the Bible, and is the Bible real, and all of that, because he is so black and white, I have to remember that God created him and knew he was going to have autism. And I cannot worry about that. Like I have to know that God did not make a mistake with him. So there's just been a few things like we've had to work through. But therapy was a big thing, and then schooling was a big thing too. Did I answer your question? I feel like I'm not answering your questions.
No, you're doing great. You're opening the door for me. I'm thinking of questions as you're talking. So
Okay.
I want to back up a little bit. You were saying you were trying to decide whether to send him to a special school or homeschool. What advice would you give for parents when they're not sure, based on the knowledge you have, and when would it be good to choose each option?
So for Ryson, the biggest reason about going to public school is that I am not a structured person. I'm just not. He needs like structure, and they give him structure. So for me, I've had to let go a little bit. The reason we chose public school was because they have people who are trained in it, and I'm not trained in it. Now I do have a bachelor's in education. But for me, it was like, I will homeschool if I absolutely have to. And right now I don't absolutely have to. Um, maybe I will have to in like, a few years when he enters high school. I just don't know what that's going to look like. But for us, it was like, okay, where do we think he's going to thrive? He needs to be with other kids. If he was home all day, he would be by himself. It would just be him and I would have to like drag him out of the house to do any type of activity. Like he would stay home all day long every day because he just likes that. So for us, it was like, okay, he's going to have some structure. He's going to be learning, and he's going to be able to meet some kids his own age that also have autism. And so that was why we decided that. Now that could change. When we were going to move to Texas, I was fully planning on homeschooling him because I was going to have the time and I wasn't going to be working. And I didn't feel confident in the programs that the school had there. Whereas I feel confident in the programs here. Now, is it the best? No, but it meets his needs. And I have had to lower my expectations as to like what I expect. Like right now, he's in sixth grade. He doesn't do math at a sixth grade level, maybe third, maybe. And I have to be okay with that. Like just knowing like his development is so different from every other kid. I mean, even kids on the autism spectrum, like his development's going to be different. And I cannot compare to a neurotypical or even a kid in his autism classroom.
Wow. Okay, I just thought of another question. So, if there are families out there listening right now who think, well, I'm just going to homeschool them, my child, I'm not going to get therapy or resources. In your opinion, what difference have you seen in Ryson's life because you did give him therapy, you did put him in a school, that was that the school he needed and the help he needed? How has that helped him, and what has changed in him?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing with therapy is like it just depends on the kid. I think every child on the spectrum needs therapy. I think parents over therapize. That's a word. I think I just made it up.
I don't know.
Um,
You made a
and
new
then
word.
therapize their kids. And then there are people who don't do any therapy at all. And so we kind of were like in the middle. We did as much therapy that we thought we needed, but he was also getting some of that at school. And so we felt like that burden was off of us a little bit to like constantly have him in therapy all the time. Now, granted, it is his age too. Like he was diagnosed at 6, which is a lot older than most people's kids are diagnosed. So we missed a window of opportunity when we just didn't know we didn't know. We didn't even suspect at that point. So I would say like you have to figure out what works for your kid. Don't over therapize and like make it your whole life about therapy because then you're gonna go crazy. But don't under therapize. Under therapize. Totally, I love it. Under therapize your kid either, but finding resources are available. I think the biggest thing is, well, and it depends on the kid. The spectrum's so wide. Ryson, for him, it's social. He is not a social person. He is very rigid in what he wants. And he does not want to stray from that. And so we have had to learn techniques to, one, help him manage his anger. And two, we do use medication. And I know some people are not for that. It took me a while. And my mom was like, if your child had cancer, Alyson, you would give them medicine. Why are you so against medication for your son for this? And I was like, wow, okay, that's actually a really great point. And so I had to reframe my mind in terms of medication, but we don't over medicate him either. Like we probably under medicate him. And so just finding what works for your family. And if something doesn't work, quit it. Like that's another thing too. Like try it. And if it doesn't work or you're not seeing results or it's so time consuming, stop. We were driving 45 minutes after school every day for therapy. And I was like, we can't do this anymore. Like he's going to school till 3. And then we're driving 45 minutes and he's spending 3 hours in therapy. Like, no, we're not doing this anymore. And so we stopped that therapy because it just wasn't worth our time and it was causing more stress than it was causing good. So I think that's a big thing too. If it's causing more stress than good, stop it. And that's okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of parents are scared to start because they think there's not an end date. But what you said is encouraging. You can stop at any time and try a different therapy or a different therapist, right?
Right? 100%. You can always start and stop things to make sure you're doing what's best for your kid and your family life, because a diagnosis can control your life. And I don't think it has to. I think it becomes a part of your life, but it doesn't control your life. And I think sometimes people let it control their lives.
I think you do such a good job of that. And that's exactly why I wanted to interview you. Because you always share the realities, but then you share the positives and how you've made a change as a family. Like, I love what you said about your husband. He had to grieve the dreams he had for himself with his child. How many times as adults we have to do that and sacrifice what we expected parenthood to be and realize I'm going to do what's best for my kid. My kid isn't me, so I need to do what's best for my kid. But I think a lot of parents have a hard time with that because they have an idea of how they were going to experience life with their kids. So that's a great point. That could be a whole nother podcast, grieving what
Yeah.
you thought life was going to be with your child. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It's a whole ball. It's a whole can that we could open right now, but we won't.
Next time.
Next time. Part two.
Part two. I wanted to ask one more question about therapy. What kinds of things do they do in therapy with Ryson and explain to people how that works and give some examples of how that helps them in life?
Well, the biggest therapy for kids with autism is ABA therapy. And that just helps them work through their emotions. And it just depends, like socially or transitions. Transitions for kids with autism is really hard. So it's giving them the tools to be able to transition better or manage their emotions and their feelings. So I always encourage people to look into ABA. It's very controversial. I mean, some people are like adamantly against it and some people absolutely love it. You have to figure out for yourself if it's something like you even want to like do. Occupational therapy is really big for kids with autism. That really helped Ryson out a lot. He was doing speech, but he never really needed speech therapy. But they were doing that at school. And then for him, he was also doing physical therapy just because he was also born with a club foot. So that, and his core is really weak. So he was probably doing like 3 or 4 therapies at one point. But we've kind of come out of a lot of that now. We're kind of out of the therapy world since he's grown a little bit, which is nice.
Wow. So would you say it's time to put some of the therapy on the shelf because it's done its job and he's mastered some of those skills?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think again, everything has a season. Um, and it just depends on your kid. It just depends on the level of autism. I hate to say that, but where they're at on the spectrum. Ryson's very high functioning. He's verbal, like, very intelligent. Whereas, he's in class with some kids who are nonverbal, who probably need a little more intensive therapy. So it really just depends on the kid, but don't be afraid of it. At least explore it, try it. And again, if it doesn't work, walk away from it, and that's okay.
Wow. So if we were to have Ryson on right now and ask him what he thinks his superpower is because of his autism diagnosis, what do you think he would say?
Oh, he'd be like, I don't know. He probably wouldn't say anything. I don't think he would say he has a superpower. He's good at math, but it's not like Rain Man math type of stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's not, I don't think he has the superpower, except for he can remember so many things. He has
Yeah.
memory that is just insane. Like things he's like, Mom, remember this? And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And he
Wow.
remember, yeah, or he'll remember just he's really into watching like YouTube videos of whatever he's into at the time. I don't know what it is right now. Sonic. It was superheroes like 3 days ago. And now we're back to Sonic. It's all circular, like it all cyclical. He's back to Sonic and he can tell you every single Sonic character when they were created, like the games. I mean, he can do the same with Godzilla, like every Godzilla. Like so he can memorize facts and spit them out. Like I've never seen it. So that might be a
Well, yeah, I've noticed you've posted that over the years on your socials, like whatever he's passionate about, he's going to learn and then he's going to teach you. And just think
Yes.
about where that's going to take him in life. If he's fascinated with something, you're going to learn about it too. So you're going to be professionals about everything, whatever Ryson is professional about.
It's very true. And, we've embraced that about him. Going back to like my husband grieving some of that, because he's not into sports at all. And my husband is like a sports fanatic. But we have to get into his world. And I think that is really, really important as parents, no matter what your kid's into. Like our daughter was really into softball. She played travel ball for 10 years or whatever. We just, we were just we were all into that. And now for Ryson, now that our daughter's like graduated, she's moving on, to college, we get to totally dive into Ryson's world, which we have, but even more so now that, our daughter will be out of the house, but being into what they're into. Like I'm not into Sonic, but I am because he is. Like I'm gonna be into Sonic and I'm gonna get him all the Sonic Lego sets and or Godzilla, like we're gonna watch the Godzilla movie, or Ryan took him to the Godzilla movie that just came out, so like you have to be in their world, even though I don't give a crap about Sonic or Godzilla. I do because he's so into it and I need to be into what he's into.
Oh, I love that. Wow. Now I'm thinking about something else because you brought up your daughter. What has it been like for her to be a big sister to a brother with autism? What have been her struggles? What have been her successes? What do you think she would say if she was here?
She's been amazing with him. And I think the age gap, they're 6.5 years apart. So I think that helps. So she's a little more understanding of like what's going on. Um, she's very helpful with him. I think her biggest thing, and she would say this, is that, for example, we're moving her into her dorm on Monday. And the timing just doesn't work with us getting Ryson on the bus and getting him home. So we're like, hey, we're just going to bring him with us and he can help. And she's like, no, he's going to be a hindrance. Like it's going to be awful. Like he's going to have a meltdown or that type of thing. So I think she struggles with like the public meltdowns, and when you're out, you're not sure how it's going to play out. Like you don't know if we're at the restaurant, if he's going to be like, I'm done, let's go. You know what I mean? And then freak out because we're not leaving it. So I think she has struggled with that over the years. And even, so, like talking about moving in, she just was like, no, I don't want him to come. She mellowed out. But other than that, um, she has said like, we can't do certain things because of Bryson. Like that's not fair. And I'm trying to remember like, what are the things? I forget, like going certain places or doing certain things. It's just hard to bring a child with autism to do certain things. And I think that she has felt that herself and maybe a little resentment because of the diagnosis and just our life. But other than that, she's amazing. She always has been.
So, as a parent, how did you help your daughter in those moments when you could sense she was feeling that way?
We try to tell her all the things that we get to do. So I will just say this, like, for example, when we go to Disneyland or Disney World, Ryson's diagnosis, like you get an ADA pass and you get to like not stand in all the lines.
Wow.
You have to wait, but you don't have to wait in line. And so there have been some like I don't want to say perks because that sounds awful, but it is like, you know what, babe, we get to do some things that other people don't get to do because of him. I think that helps her a little bit, but also just like, you know what, this is the hand that we were all dealt. You're a part of this family. And embracing it and not resenting it is really important because he brings strengths to our family that you don't have, and you bring strengths that he doesn't have. And so just helping her understand that. And I think as she's gotten older, I don't think she resents it as much, or even, yeah, probably as much, or gets as frustrated as much as she probably did when she was a little younger.
So, if we have a parent listening right now who has a child who feels like your daughter, what is something they could do to give that child maybe a little bit more attention or help them come to terms that your daughter has? What are some practical ideas you have?
We have actually taken her on trips just by herself. So that has been a really big deal, and just poured into her personally, or like we'll take her to a movie and leave Bryson, the babysitter or my in-laws or something like that. Giving time to her that where her brother is not involved. You know what I mean? That we have figured all that out. Let's go to Universal, or like luckily we've been able to do that with her. We took her to Florida by herself and did like a whole weekend trip. And she said it was like her favorite trip ever. So just giving one-on-one time, listening. My husband's amazing at that. Like he'll just go hang out with her and listen and watch a show with her where it's not so focused around our son, but it's really time and intentional time with just her, I think that has been very helpful.
Wow. I love that. I love hearing all this because I think you guys have so much insight to share. And I love whenever you share about your husband. You guys are such an amazing team. And I've seen when families have a child get a diagnosis, it can rip the marriage apart. And I've seen divorces, I've seen marriages fall apart. And maybe that will be another podcast. But if you have like a minute here to share, how have you helped your marriage stay strong despite this diagnosis?
Well, we're on the same team, like we both have the same end goal. I sometimes I feel like it's harder to parent our daughter than it is our son, just because um I don't know why, but just because just because.
Yeah.
Um
I've heard that before.
oh, it's probably not uncommon. But we're on the same page, and we have a lot of open communication about him. And if we do have like a disagreement about a certain situation with either of our kids, frankly, but with him, we're always able to come to a consensus. And like I said, I think sometimes parenting him is easier in terms of our communication and what we believe is best for him than it is even our daughter, because you know it's hard to, well, teenage daughters are just hard in general. So yeah. I think we're just on the same page and the same team. So it hasn't been a struggle for us. I don't know. I don't know.
Would you
Right?
say it would be a good suggestion if someone listening here is struggling in their marriage to go to a counselor who is
Oh,
autism informed? Do you think that's a big, important part of it?
oh, yeah, or just trauma informed maybe, because I think that when you get that diagnosis, there is some traumatic elements to that, where you can kind of be stunted in your growth and your movement because you just don't know what to do. So yeah, I mean, if there are counselors that are autism informed, I didn't know there was such a thing. If there is, that's amazing. I would say absolutely. But if there is a problem just in the marriage in general, 100% counseling, because I always think about this. I come from a divorced family, and my parents divorced when I was in my 20s. And it's difficult. It's even difficult now as an adult with my mom being remarried. My dad has passed. But like there are some things with my mom that I'm like, if they hadn't got divorced, this probably would be easier. You know what I mean? Things would just be different and easier. And so I always think down the road of like, what does this mean for our kids? If we were ever to get divorced, not like we've ever even talked about it or anything, but it's always like, what is this going to look like for our kids when they're 35? Especially with an autistic child, like who's going to take care of him? Who is he going to stay with? Is he going to go back and forth? Like, it's so much better to just stay together and work on your marriage than it is to figure all that crap out. I would much rather do the hard now than like do the hard later with my kids who are grown adults and then trying to figure that out. Like, let's just figure out the hard now and stay together because we love each other, even though we've never had that conversation.
Yeah. No,
So
thank you. That was very good information. I appreciate that. Well, you answered all the questions that I had for today, so I just have one last question before we go. Just something a little more lighthearted and a way to end the podcast today on a fun note. So I'm going to ask all the friends I interview on the podcast this question, and it is, what is your favorite memory of us together?
I've only met you one time in person, Casey, and that was what, last year in November or October. Um, that's one of my favorite memory, just because we've been friends, like online friends for such a long time, that I feel like I know you, even though we've only met in person one time. So that would be my favorite memory, is actually getting to meet you in person.
Like we say, it's okay to make online friends, but
Yes.
maybe not for our kids. But when you're,
Yeah, no, no, no. Not until your brain is fully formed and you can make good decisions. And I mean, you can't go wrong being in a pastor's wife Facebook group. There weren't any men in there, I don't think. And there were a few weirdos, but I knew you weren't one of those weirdos.
I think both of us aren't even in that group anymore. I didn't
Oh
mean to
my
not
God.
be in it. I started a whole new Facebook and forgot to rejoin it, but we stayed friends even though we don't talk in that group anymore.
I know, isn't that crazy how it brought us together and we've met one time? Yeah, the world is wild.
It
Wild.
is. It is. And I think before we go, the one reason that I really wanted to bring Alyson on here today is because if you follow her socials, I'll post them in the show notes. Allison reminds me of just when David wrote the Psalms. She'll complain about what's going on, she's honest, she's real, and then she ends with giving glory to God and trying to see the bright side of life. And you're going to get real and honest opinions when you follow her, but I would rather follow someone who is honest than who's fake and just says what they're supposed to say all the time.
Thank Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do, Casey.
The world needs more people like you, Allison.
Oh gosh, I don't know about that, but thank you. I'm a nut for everything.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I'm sure I will have you on again. You have so much knowledge in so many other areas, so I'm sure this will not be our last time on here. And if anyone listening, if this episode touched you in any way, if you learned something, if you have someone in your life that you want them to be able to learn from what Alyson said today about autism, please go ahead and share this. We want to get the word out. That's why I'm doing this podcast, so that people can learn the beauty and the wonder of autism, but also how to get through the struggles and how to make it through alive, and not just survive, but to thrive like Alyson and her family are doing. And I can say that 100%. I know in my heart that she's real, and if she's telling you this, it's working for her, and I've seen it lived out in her life, and I'm so proud of her. So, and for anyone else listening, thank you for watching, and I would love it if you could share, subscribe, or tune in for more episodes on my podcast. Just hit subscribe on the Podbean app or the YouTube page, and I will be so excited to just do more episodes like this with my friends. You guys, it's going to be amazing. So thank you for hanging out with us today. Thank you for being on here, Alyson, and I really appreciate you and your time. I know you're so busy. So yes. So we'll just say goodbye, and I hope you guys all have an amazing week.
Thanks.